Hello, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon of the National Veteran Disabled Winter Sports Clinic at home this year. Today, we are going to be with Mr. Mark Copanzzi, retired United States Secret Service Assistant Director, who has had over 30 years of law enforcement experience. He is going to share various scenarios and basic self-defense techniques for individuals of all abilities. Mark, are you ready to get ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'd like to, before we get started, do a special thanks to Jennifer, Heather, and Teresa Parks for this invitation to present to you today. And a special thanks to all the veterans for your service. We are honored to be part of this winter sports clinic with you and remotely with you. So today's class is self-defense for all abilities. That was the course that we've been teaching for the last 25 years at the Academy. Some of you know me personally and have been in the class before. But because we're not in person, we're not going to be able to do the full class. We're not going to have a lot of hands-on. So we actually renamed the class and we modified it somewhat. So the class name we'll be using today would be the Personal Protection, Self and Environmental Awareness. And a lot of the ideas and theories that we'll go over today and some of the techniques are from my past and from my history, not only as a martial artist, but of course, as a former Secret Service agent and a Metropolitan Police officer. And while with the Secret Service, as I said in the past, I protected several of the presidents and dignitaries. And as a police officer in Metropolitan DC, I did a lot of undercover work as well as I had a great experience while assigned to what was called their decoy squad. And we'll be able to talk about some of the events that translate to good self-defense and or protection or security for ourselves. So today, and we're going to start with our agenda. And the first thing we're going to talk about is formatting a safety plan. We're going to move from there to being able to evaluate and limit our exposure to possible threats or risk with a general good practice. And then we're going to move into general security and protection tips around your residence. From there, we'll move to the last section of this, which normally we would do a lot of hands-on work. So we'll walk our way through some of the personal protection tips, victimology. I like to say, don't play the part of the victim. We'll talk about criminology, and then we'll talk about surviving the threat and or trauma. So we'll move to the first section. But before I do this, I really want to thank my assistant today, and I'm going to show you her today. Her name is Sarah. She's the smart one here. She's my technical advisor, and we'll have her later in the show talk about some of the things that she would use to protect herself around her house. So we'll get to that. So the first point on our agenda is, how do we formulate a good strategic safety plan? So the first thing I could tell you is, in my life with the Secret Service, I had to protect many dignitaries and presidents. The first thing, of course, and the most valuable tool is your mind. Your ability to think, above all, is the best gift that we have to be able to possibly prevent and or avoid particular incidences. So when I talk about being able to think, I'm also talking about being able to walk through planned activities and or events. Such as if we were going to go out to Colorado this year, some of the things that you would be thinking about is transportation from your home to the possible airport, from the airport to the hotel, and eventually on the slopes, and what you would need. That same kind of mental formatting that you're doing can also be associated with a good security plan. So we'll walk through these. And by doing that, we're going to be able to hopefully possibly identify possible threats, risk, and obstacles. And in the service, any agent that's assigned to the president has to do what we call sights. If the president was going into to a VA hospital. An agent would be there hopefully at least a week in advance, and he would hopefully understand the ins and outs of that whole hospital. And at night, he'd probably go home and he'd close his eyes or back to the hotel, and he'd be able to walk from the arrival point of the dignitary or the president through the hospital, and he'd have a picture in his mind of who he would meet at what junction point in that hospital and what doors are available to them. And we see doors or possible windows as a possible threat. So we're going to exercise our mind during this. And if you have any questions, please let me know as we go through this. So the next thing we're going to talk about is prepare for the activity, bring what you need to support that activity. Now, for the last year, we have been practicing good safety, and it's centered around COVID. Now, some of the things that we do is we have a mask, right? We wear our mask when we're within 6 feet. We also have hygiene where we make sure that we have the appropriate hand lotions that we use. And we make sure that we're outside that 6-foot umbrella in reference to other people. So these are the things that actually can still transition us into, hopefully when COVID goes away, we can still be hyper attentive to when people get within that 6 feet, that our alert system then lets us know that we could possibly have an issue with who's ever within arm's reach of us. So things that we need to consider. Am I alone? And if I am alone, where am I going? And is that an appropriate place for me to go alone? We also look at time of day. We also look at how many people will be at the event or where I need to go. We talk about transportation. And one of the things in reference to transportation is we have to understand what's available to us. Are we going to take an Uber? Are we going to take a cab? Are we going to take public transportation? If we are taking public transportation, what's the schedule look like? I have been trapped basically on public transportation. My first event on public transportation was here in the DC area. I took the Metro downtown to a nice event. I enjoyed the event. I walked over to the Metro. It was around midnight to find out, because it was a weeknight, the Metro was closed. Bad planning on my part. So don't get caught like I did with thinking I'm taking public transportation home, and then I had to find a particular cab or whatever I could do, whatever means I had that particular time. It becomes very uncomfortable when you're in a place where you don't know that you're either lost or stuck. So don't do as I do, please. And then we talk about, if we're going somewhere, if we are lucky enough to drive or have someone drive us, is there a place that we could park? Is the parking in the same building? Is it at a curb, or is it a block away? And then we talk about, if we're going into that building, what are the entry points? What are the access points? How can I go? Can I go into that building? Do I have to climb stairs, or is there an elevator, or is there an access to a particular ramp? These are the things that you do almost every day when you do your planning. And all we're adding to this is safety. So we add that, then we add clothing and support accessories that are important to us. As we consider these, we then probably have to move to the next step, which is actionable. And we talk about actionable, we'll talk about, I know there's this or that, what can I do to mitigate those possible issues? How can I manage or limit our exposure to that risk or that particular hurdle? Remember this, the decisions you make during your planning stages can determine a successful outcome of this adventure or this event. All right, so let's go back to what we were talking about before. Will I be alone, or will I be accompanied by somebody? Remember, 2 or more is always better than 1 when we're talking about security. Daylight is always better than night. And I bring up daylight for the point is, sometimes when the days are shortened, we start to maybe go to the doctors, go shopping, and by the time we leave that particular event, it's dark. So maybe when it was light, the area or the environment was completely different than when it turns night. We could look at our malls, and sometimes the malls close certain doors, and in the evening hours, only certain doors are up and be able to exit. When you exit, you may have to walk and or move through a parking lot where it's dimly lit. So those are the things you need to evaluate as you do that. The other thing you need to evaluate is busy and well-populated areas are usually better than sparse and deserted areas for the obvious reason. More people, less likely that you'll be picked out as a possible victim to an event. If someone is driving you, and it doesn't matter if it's an Uber, it doesn't matter if it's a cab or it's a friend, always ask that individual to stay a couple seconds more to assure that you get or gain entry into the building that you need. I've had that in several occasions. They were more gracious to wait for me to get into buildings. Also, I was on a bus, and I actually witnessed an elderly woman ask the bus driver just to wait until she got into her building. And you know what? I was so happy that he did. I didn't care if I was running late or what. It only took a few moments for him, and she felt safe for it. So I was happy that the bus driver was able to do that. So when we evaluate these things as our plan, and we formatting these plans, and we evaluate and limit our exposure, these are the type of things that I know that a lot of you do every day, but sometimes we get a little careless or we don't think, or sometimes we go to an area where we don't even know what the area looks like. And those are the ones that could be troublesome, where you believe you're in a downtown area where it may be highly populated. You find out that maybe that was a renovation block, that it's not as populated as you think. There may be construction on there. They hinder you in your chair and or hinder you walking, or it's so sparse that you may be the only one with people that probably have no business in that particular area. And then all of a sudden you start to either get nervous or concerned for your possible safety. For a lot of reasons, one of which is that you're not familiar with the area. So those are general practices, and we're going to take those general practices later in this presentation, and we're going to get more specific on what we can do to either alleviate or protect ourselves from the possibility of a surprise and or trauma event. So now we're going to get into general practices of security around your residence. And it doesn't really matter if it's a hotel room, doesn't matter if it's an apartment, condo, and or a home, a single family home, or whatever. So these rules apply across the board to your residence. The first thing, of course, is in any residence, you have to make sure that all your doors and windows are in good working condition and the locks work. The ground floor, above all those windows and doors need to be double locked and or able to in some way be adapted with an accessory to help lock. Now, I have seen people use pieces of wood, pieces of metal in the jamb of the window to also prevent someone from manipulating that window off the track. So they work very well. And any ground level window and or first floor always needs, before you go to bed at night, make sure those windows are secured properly, to include your doors. Something that I see in my neighborhood often is people forget to lock their garage doors. And for the obvious reason, they get into your garage, there's one door, they're hidden by the darkness of the garage, and next thing you know, they're jimmying the door to get into the regular house. Or if you're really unlucky, you didn't lock that door either, and they have complete entry into your residence. So remember your garage doors. Then we talk about, and Sarah's going to show you here in a second, about the trees and branches. We won't be able to show that. Mm-hmm. So we have homes in our neighborhood where we have bushes, and we have trees that are too close to some of the homes. And the bushes close to the front door is the obvious problem. You could, in the evening hours, someone could be in those particular bushes. And while they're in those bushes, as you're trying to manipulate that lock on your front door, as soon as it's open, they could jump out and they are in your home with you. So I traveled my whole neighborhood and I found some of these problems, but not many, which I was glad. And maybe 10 years ago, it was commonplace where you'll see a lot of nice high bushes next to the front door. It was aesthetically pleasing, but it truly wasn't a security concern. But nowadays we are getting security conscious, and I see a lot of people landscaping appropriately around their homes. The other issue you have is near your garage door, and a lot of people then on both sides of the garage door show trees in reference to it. And when you have that near there, for the obvious reason, you hit your garage door open, you're thinking you're going to be going into the garage, it's late at night, and the next thing you know, somebody follows you in with your car. And normally when they walk in opposite side of the driver's side, and they're in that natural blind spot that you have to be concerned about. You shut the garage door, and you and that individual or more could be in that same room with you, which would lead to a possible bad situation for yourself. So we're going to try to move from there, and we're going to go into other possible issues that you have in and about your home. Some are trees. I'll say this because I had a personal problem, and I had a tree that was too close to my house, and it was too close to one of the bedrooms. And my 13-year-old son at the time found out that was a great escape route when mom and dad went to bed. And instead of going through the house to the front doors, he would go to that window, open it in the middle of the night, and it was easy access out. And he'd climb down the tree, and he'd be off in the neighborhood doing things that I could just imagine. And then sometime by morning, he was always home. Now, I did some inspection around the house. So I found that the tree, one limb was broken. I couldn't figure out what was going on until Mama got up one night and found little Georgie missing. And then Georgie had some explaining to do, and that tree was eventually trimmed. But think of it, my son was able to use the tree to get out of the house. Could someone else use the tree to get in the house? So those are the things that you have to be very concerned of around your home. The other things, lighting around the home is very important. Nowadays, the technology is you could have a lot of motion detectors. If someone walks onto your porch, someone walks near that garage, in your driveway, on your lawn, lights light up. The criminal element, they don't like lights, and the other thing they don't like is video cameras. And now sometimes there are combined lighting with videos, and some instances you have what's called the ring element for a doorbell, and that also has a nice video for you. And we're finding that is a great deterrence a lot of times for people who they call them porch pilots that might steal something off your porch and or want to do something nefarious as they knock on your door and hope you come to the door. So these are great deterrents, and you have to remember that they're available to you, and the costs have gone down tremendously in reference to a lot of these items that are out there. Another thing that you have to remember is when you leave your home, you also have to leave your home secure. Can't leave any of the doors open. You don't want to be surprised by somebody in your house. If you ever come home and you find a light as you're sitting outside trying to come into your residence, and you find either the music on or you see some lights on that you didn't turn on, the best recommendation I can give you is do not enter the home at all. Call 911, call the police, tell them you just arrived at home. There appears to be something different about the inside of your house. The lights weren't on, or try to describe to them. They'll bring a cruiser or a police car to your house, and give them the keys, and they will enter your house, and hopefully they find your house still secure. So again, don't be the investigator to go into that house. It's not good to be surprised in your own home, and it's not safe. Another thing that sometimes we forget is when we buy a new home or we move into an apartment, we forget that someone lived there prior to us in most cases, and those locks are set to a particular key that we had no control of. So I would recommend highly in a residential area that you change those locks. You don't know if the former owner kept a set for themselves and or neighbors have them, or the criminal element already has them already. So I would recommend changing those locks as quickly as you can and making sure that you and your loved ones have the only keys to that house. So moving on from there, and again, just as a reminder, at the end of this course, we're going to be able to put the PowerPoint on, and you'll see some of these pictures that we were able to take and reference to what I'm talking about the house, about the first floor windows, on how easy it would be to access, and also the bushes that are next to the home. That is very easy for someone to hide themselves under the darkness of cover and then come out when you least expect it. One of the other issues, and again, I use my own self as an example, or in this case, I'll use my wife as a bad example. I was doing some work around the house. She wanted to change some light bulbs, so she took some light fixtures out, and she used some tools, and she didn't put them away. And I came home after a trip, after about 3 days, and I go in through the backyard, and I find ladders outside next to my windows and next to my deck. And I said to myself, wonder if someone in the house did it intentionally, the wife and or one of my sons, and or did someone use this to make entry to my house? So don't make it easy for the bad guys. Don't have ladders in your yards. I know a lot of times it's hard to secure. If you have one of these 20-foot ladders, you may not have a place to put it inside the house. But if you need to put it outside, some of the tips are, some people put poles in the ground with a lock associated with it, with a chain. They put it against their chain link fence, or they put it against the pool, so it can't be pulled away. And the only way it can be used is if you use your key to open that lock to allow that ladder to be moved. Just don't let it sit there. Other things I see is people do leave other tools, other equipment. I've found metal bars in the yards and on porches, and those metal rods can be easily used and adapted. If you had any kind of door, any kind of lock, that they could put that piece of metal into and jimmy that lock. Now, again, I'm using myself as a bad example here. The same son that climbs out the windows loved to use a jimmy jar to open up my sliding door. And until he broke the door one day, then we had some explaining to do. So again, here's my own son would lose his key and then find a way to get into the particular house. So he can do it, anybody can do it, in reference to that. The next thing you want to do in your house is to make sure that you are command of the situation at all times in your house. You have to know where everything's at. If you prefer darkness over light, if it doesn't matter, if it's dark in your home because you can mask your home, maybe it's a better thing to do if you hear a noise or something, to dim the lights because you know where everything's at. Or sometimes people like it brighter, and sometimes being brighter does scare the people away. But that's something each individual will has to evaluate, and during this evaluation process, you make the determination. One thing I can tell you is that when it's ready for bed, make sure that you have your phone with you at all times, and make sure your phone's charged, or at least charging, and it's within arm's reach. If you hear a noise in the house, you should have a plan. Am I going to go down and check on it? Or if I really believe it's somebody's actually in the house, what can I or should I do in reference to that? And we're going to talk about that in a minute, but that's really important, that you don't have to be the hero. If you're in your bedroom, lock that door. If there's a bathroom associated with that bedroom, lock yourself in, call the 911. So it leads us into the point of each room. We should have a security plan for the whole house. And such as I would if the president was going to the DAV, I would have a room dedicated for security that I know that I can defend as best as possible. So you should evaluate your home, your residence from that perspective. If you're the only one in that residence, then you should say, okay, this room fits what I need. And what I need most is a secure room that has a nice door to it, that has a nice lock to it. And I also prefer a way out, normally a window. And I don't care if it's on the second floor, because I'd rather jump out of the second floor window than confront someone who may be armed or otherwise in that house. Now, as we take action or we take evaluation to that home, and we have to consider several things, is especially at night, what access points, what do I need to get to that particular room? And maybe I can have a safe room on the first floor because I'm stuck on the first floor. And it's something about having the planning stages. And we're going to talk about events, and we'll talk about the mental and physical inoculation to trauma. And half of that is thinking your way through the possible problem, but also evaluating at the time that the event happens, you've already thought of it in your mind, a planning stage, such as, I know growing up, I had several children and I was always worried about fire. So I'd always tell the kids at night, if there's a fire and you hear me scream to the fire, I'll either tell you to come to me or stay in your room. Either I'll come get you. If I can't come get you, I'll tell you to probably shut your door and get near your window, because I knew that I would have access. And I also knew that we had letters associated with our windows so the firemen knew in our community they could respond. Those are the kind of things that you need to do in reference to your home for security, and also for having a plan. And you need to walk yourself through, as we talked earlier in this presentation, about walking you through mentally through these events. And sometimes it's laying in bed and say, okay, I smell smoke. What am I going to do? If I only smell smoke and I don't see enough smoke and or fire, maybe I can investigate. If it's too much smoke, what am I going to do? If I'm in my bedroom and it's a master bedroom with a master bath, maybe I'll go in there because the smoke is too much for me. In that bathroom, I know I have water and I know I have towels, and I'll be able to wet those and put them around the areas of the door to prevent smoke getting in there. But I also know that I have a window that I can get out at any time. And I know, because I put my phone next to the bed, that when I left the bed, I took my phone and I called 911 and the fire department's on their way. So those are the things we plan for, and if we need them in the event of an incident such as a fire. But if we have an incident such as an intruder in a house, we can absolutely do the same thing. I hear a noise, I have my phone, I go to my safe room, I lock the door, I could hear them possibly going and rummaging through my house, and I could call 911. First thing, of course, you always want to identify yourself, you want to identify your location, then with your address. Then you need to tell them the location of where you're at in the house. And then they're going to probably ask you to describe yourself. You can say that, you're 5'8", 5'10", whatever it is, brown hair, black hair, whatever it is, and what you're dressed in and what attire is. And you can tell the officer when he arrives, please call out your name. And hopefully only that person, and they'll identify themselves as a police officer. They'll clear the house and eventually get to you and knock on the door and say, it's all clear, please come out, Heather or Kara or whomever. And then you could assure, hopefully, a safe evening. Now, there are certain things and certain reasons why I pick one room over another one. And most of it is because of the physical securityness of it. But also, I take certain rooms because what's readily available to me. And if it's not readily available, maybe I could possibly bring things into the room with me before I lock myself down. So Sarah and I are here, and we're going to show you some items that we brought today Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
So I'll go first and I'll talk about some things that I brought from home that I might be able to use on an intruder. All right, so I'll go to my bag, and the first thing I have is, can we see?
I know, that's a.
Wow, it's invisible in my hand today.
Let me stop you on that.
Hey, Mark, the best thing you might want to do there you go.
Okay, so what I have here is Hornet Spray. And what's good about Hornet Spray, I can reach out and touch somebody and I don't have to be that close. It would be much better if it was bear spray, because we know bear spray has a pepper to it, and a pepper burns. But I will assure you that this in someone's face would delay them, and also, and it says here, looking at the eyes, that you need to, for 15 to 20 full minutes, put nice cold compresses and wash your eyes out with. So yes, this could possibly be a deterrent of some sort if you need it. Now we're talking about last resorts and what's available to you. So I took the hornet's nest. Sarah, what do you have?
I got a knife.
Okay, Sarah goes to the extreme. She took a knife. All right, let's see what I have in my bag. So I'm going to go, well, this is random. So I took the Lysol spray. This goes out about, I guess, 4 feet. It guarantees to take soap and scum away from my shower. But also, it's really good because it is an eye irritant as well. So what else do you have, Sarah?
Scissors.
Oh.
Sharp scissors.
Okay. Sarah's one up in me on this. Okay. So the next one I have is Clorox cleaning bleach. We know we don't like bleach. It's a caustic, and also it's bad for the eyes. So if I'm in the bathroom and all these things were associated to my bathroom, that it works for me. Sarah, what do you have?
Giant fork. Stab.
Okay, stab. Okay. Remember, don't visit Sarah at night and be an unwanted guest. Okay, so I actually have a homemade thing that we make for cleaning around the house, and it's called vinegar and water. We clean windows or whatever with it, and vinegar has an acid burn. If you ever got vinegar in your eyes, it's really not a good thing. So I took the vinegar and water. Sarah, I'm afraid to ask you what you have, so let's see what Sarah has.
Meat tenderizer.
A meat tenderizer. Okay. I don't know if I can top everything you're doing here. I have paint. It's available to me. It sprays out about 3 or 4 paint. And can it work? Yeah. Not only can it work as a spray deterrent, but also I could use it as a nice weapon because it's firm and it has a lot of weight and its tail end here.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, what else do you have?
If all else fails, get another knife.
Okay. So Sarah is on this this knife thing. So I think it's a good time that we could take another look. And Sarah, apparently on your way to your safe room, where's a good safe room in your house?
Probably the bedroom, since we'll be in there in my kid's bedroom. Yeah.
So you passed the kitchen to get to the bedroom and you grabbed all these items. Okay, just testing Sarah here. So those are the things, and I know a lot of you during the years have asked, does one thing work over another thing? The thing I could tell you is be committed to your preservation and to you to make it through this particular moment. And when you're dealing with any of these substances that I showed you today, you have to understand mentally that although the subject gets sprayed, you may be smelling this caustic thing and it may impact you, but you have to have the mindset here to overcome this. The bad guy may not have it. They may just want enough is enough. It's time for that person to retreat. And especially if you start screaming and they're on the other side of that door, you just call 911. They're very limited to what they can do, hopefully, and that their urgency is to get out and not get caught. So please think about what you have in your house. have a particular plan as to what you can use, what you can't use, and whatever you use. Now, Sarah, and we laugh, but we had a lot of you in the past talk about knives, talks about guns and stuff. So I don't like going that road, because the one thing I need to warn you, if you have a weapon of any sort, it could be turned on you. If you're not either well trained or not committed to use these, then you've given the bad guys, the criminal element, the tool to use against you in this. So we're going to get into this last section, and the last section has to do with your mind. Your ability to think is the number one tool that we talked about before, and when it comes to defending yourself for possible harm. One thing that we want to make sure we do is always observe everything that's around us. And we have a new world of technology, and a lot of times people are on their phones, they're texting, they're listening on their earbuds to music and things. These are the things that we need to make sure that we are not distracted and are about or close to an area that could present a difficulty, either tripping, falling, or being accosted by an unknown. Those are the things that we have to think about and make sure that we always keep our wits about us and we're always observing what's around us. Some of the things that we've talked to in the past, when we're in the class, people say, you know, I don't like doing this, or I don't want to do that. Then I usually ask why. Some people say because it's just too dark, and some will say, well, I don't like going to that particular area, or, you know, going in that area, it's just too crowded. I don't like crowds. I don't like the people that are in these particular crowds, or I don't like this one person because this person always picks on me. This person always has something to say, and I don't really want to get into it. So those are the things. This is your own self telling you, I'm uncomfortable and maybe I shouldn't do it. It's not wrong to say, maybe this isn't the time, this isn't the day, or I don't want to be bothered by myself. Maybe I'll wait till the neighbor, my friend, or a family member is with me so I can deal with what I was thinking of or what I'm uncomfortable with. So those are the things that we can evaluate ourselves and think of. We want to always avoid conflict. And one of the things that we see all the time, and I see it on the news, is road rage. Again, nobody wins in road rage because of the fact that people are driving 2,000-pound weapons. You don't want to be run off the road. You don't want to be run over. And then even if you believe that the person is in the wrong and you get so upset you want to leave your car and get into this conflict with the individual, you don't know anything about the individual. The individual could have some kind of weapon. They could have a particular friend. And life's too short, and the unknown is not a good thing. And you could just forget about it and move on with your life. Take a deep breath and don't let your anger overtake your actions. Now, I'm going to say something as a police officer, as a 21-year-old police officer in DC, I made a mistake. I got angry and I didn't follow the techniques or the training that I was given. And the incident occurred, I had just left court, and it was probably around 10 o'clock in the morning. It was a Saturday morning, and I had worked all night. So I was up all night, and I'm leaving the court, and I'm driving down the street. I'm going into a tunnel, and a car cuts me off, and I almost hit the sidewall. I get really upset. The individual didn't recognize that I had an undercover police car, and the subject then made some motion to me, which agitated me more. So I flicked my lights, I walked up to the car, and I was totally upset. Now, I've had plenty of, at that time I had a year of being an active police officer. I had one of the best trainings that I've ever had in law enforcement. I thought I was prepared. Anger took over my ability to think, I stormed up to that window with the intent to really yell at this individual. As I stormed up to the window and I hit that window, the window rolled down, and I'm pointing at the subject, doing everything but not watching his hands. He reached into the glove compartment and he went to pull out a gun. And if that gun would have came completely out, he would no doubt have shot me at that time. The only thing that saved me was the trigger of that weapon. The trigger got hung up on the glove compartment lip and it got stuck. And then by the time it got stuck and he pulled it in to pull it out, then I had my weapon out. But something as simple as anger could overtake your ability to reason. So please don't let anger get in the way of good sound. And a lot of times I see it in road rage. So we're going to move into the next evaluation stage. And what usually gets us in trouble is arguments. It's not wrong to walk away or turn away from an argument that you know is going to the wrong place or to a position that you're going to get uncomfortable with or argue with. Normally it starts with talking, the discussion starts, a subject is a tipping point, the voices start to rise, tensions start to go up, animation, I'm Italian, I use my hands all the time, and it starts, he's threatening me, I'm threatening him back. We start the male posturing, I call it. He sticks out his chest, I stick out my chest. I start pointing, they start pointing. You start to see possibly the hands start to make a fist. Then all of a sudden you see the jawline start to get, you see the muscles in the jaw, you see it starting to tighten. That's the particular point. If you haven't already seen it happen, that's the point that you really need. And I call it, get the Italian in you, get your hands up, but do it in a soft manner, not in an aggressive manner like you're ready to fight, but start to talk. And the best thing you could do when those voices went up, you should start bringing your voice down to a minimal level where you can still hear each other. But sometimes that person will mimic your own behavior and then come down. And hopefully the situation is we'll just say water was put on the situation. Everyone, cooler minds could hopefully prevail. But sometimes you see it coming. You see the anger. You see the symbolism of the hands start to clench. And then all of a sudden they're in your physical zone. And I call the physical zone what you're able to reach out and touch, either by your foot, your hand, or that extension of your body, such as a cane. That is your mechanical influence. When somebody gets in that zone, you should be concerned, especially if someone's angered. And today, and we talked about it early on, what COVID has done for us. COVID has done us really well in the fact that I get uncomfortable when somebody's in 6 feet within my range, just because I don't want to possibly hear them cough on me or breathe on me. I don't want to take that particular risk. So I believe we will have a new heightened awareness, and I believe as Americans we'll have a new personal space now, and then we should be aware. I have been in the supermarket and I have seen people get close to me in line. I'm like, what is this person getting close to me for? And I have seen people turn around to the person next to them and said, do you really have to be that close to me? So that is a good thing that our antennas are up now and working. So we need to really look at that. The stages that we just talked about aggression, about a conflict, about an argument, we don't really want it to end in a physical confrontation. No winners are there. But the thing you have to realize in any physical confrontation, what will happen is they'll go after your head. You noticed all the items that I selected today were items that affect the head and the nose. You take out the brain, you take out their ability to think, you have an advantage. So you have to remember that the thing that you have to protect most on your body is your ability to think through this. So something as start to, when someone is very aggressive, start to put your hands in closest to your side is best, and be able to talk. And as I can talk softly with my hands, I call it, my hands are available to me at any particular time I need to be able to deflect anything that could possibly be sent towards my head, such as an item they have in their hand or a fist or whatever. So that is great for us to be able to have that up. And remember, so simply putting our hands up around our headline may be the difference between surviving the moment, being able to continuously think the moment. And remember, there's certain things, and we're going to get into this next, about what the subject really wants to do in some of these instances. So we talk about observing what's around you and don't be preoccupied for texting or music and the earbuds. A lot of times we're in these conversations, and when we're in conversation with somebody on a texting, you don't have any knowledge of someone sneaking up behind you, someone's about to grab your phone or anything. Sometimes you need to put that away, especially in an area that you could perceive a particular issue, or even you may be a safest area, you never had an issue before. Maybe that's something you don't want to do in public anymore. So you need to be cognizant of that. One of the other things you have to be cognizant of a fact, and Sarah does it quite well. So you're going to see some pictures of Sarah on the PowerPoint that we'll attach, is that we have a nice picture of Sarah, and she had the earbuds on, and she also had a nice purse, and she was dangling the purse and with her one hand, and if she's not paying attention, somebody could come by and just take that purse and take off. Well, as long as she's safe, I'm happy. She may not be happy she lost a purse, but that isn't something you want to do, especially if it's a nice designer purse or she's wearing a lot of jewelry. You're basically advertising what you have, and sometimes that's enough to trip the criminal element, especially if you're signaling, and we'll talk about signaling and we'll talk about victimology here shortly. But don't be an advertisement for the bad guy that you have wealth or you have something of value that may be easily obtained by them by force. Hide the jewelry, have the purse closer to your body where your arm is extended down over it, or clench the purse closer. I'm not saying walk like you're scared, but walk like you're smart. And then there's a difference between the two. Don't play part of the victim, have a command presence. So part of don't play the part of the victim, and I used to get this a lot of times because, again, I told you I was a DC policeman. In the DC area, you have a lot of the monuments, and people would come down, and especially in the spring, and they'd see the cherry blossoms, or they'll come and see the monuments, and they'll come up to me and say, "Officer, I lost my camera." And I'll say, "Well, where did you lose my camera?" "I left it in my car." So I go to the car and find out the car is a convertible. And I'm like, "Okay, you left your camera in a convertible. Was the top up?" "Well, no." "Well, did you really expect the camera was going to be there sitting on your seat when you got back?" And those are the things I see. And you look at these people and you say, where did they come from? And why don't they know the big city? Well, there's a lot of people that haven't been in the big city or hear of the big city and the do's and don'ts. So don't be one of those. I even saw a state trooper, and I won't identify the state, came in to the city, went to a hotel, gave the valet the keys of his car, forgot that he had his gun underneath the front seat, and the next morning he went to get his gun and realized it was gone. And not a good thing, especially when he has to now go home and tell his commander that he lost his gun because he was silly enough to leave it in his car unattended. And so those are the things to think of. And remember this too. We advertise on our body, we advertise in our vehicles, and we also advertise in our home. Sometimes we have our doors open. Sometimes strangers come up to the door, wanting to sell you something. They look in and they see all these valuable things. Remember this. I don't like to say don't advertise, but sometimes it's not worth it, especially if somebody wants what you have. All right, so now let's get into the next section where let's talk about playing the victim and victimology. And in the class, we talk about it often that sometimes we play the victim. And how do we play the victim? Well, part of my former life when I was a DC policeman, I was very, very lucky to be in what was called a decoy squad. And the decoy squad at that particular time, we went up to New York City and learned from them, and we came back and we looked at some theories. And some of the things we realized is bad guys like easy targets. They also like people that are alone. They also do like people that send off a signal that, one, they're afraid or they're not going to fight. And so how do we do that? Well, you'll see one of the pictures in our PowerPoint. Sarah's there modeling with all her jewelry and her purse. But if you're at the camera's eye, somebody's approaching Sarah, and the first thing she does is she looks away. So we have a habit that if we are afraid of somebody, in some world, we hope we're not there, so we look away. It's not any different than a pack of dogs or a wolf trying to join the pack. They go to the alpha, and the first thing that dog does is they turn their head. And they turn their head to the alpha saying, I am not going to be a threat, and I just want to be part of this team. And we have that same signal. I mean, we have done this unconsciously, and we have to realize that we do this. So I'm not saying stare down the people that you're afraid of, because that's not going to work either, because it could be a possible challenge in some cultures. You don't want to do that. But simply keeping your head up, acknowledging somebody's there, and sometimes just nodding is just enough that that person doesn't calculate, if they are a criminal that's done this in the past, that you'd be an easy mark, right? So those are the things we can do. Now, relating back to my decoy squad, I can tell you I witnessed it personally on top of rooftops with my binoculars, where our sergeant was dressed up as an elderly person or a handicapped person in these areas that we knew we had a high crime rate. And when he turned his head away and put his head down, it was almost like you were fishing, that all of a sudden, and you could see the criminal element walk to him, look at him, tap their buddy on the shoulder, wait till he walked by them, turned right around after a brief conversation and attacked him from the rear. It happened. When we have locked these individuals up, I was fortunate enough to interview them and said, what triggered it? And they told me right away. We thought he had something that we could take, and it would take seconds and we'd be able to get away. So those are the things you're trying to not emulate or reflect. And the other thing, of course, what we learned is they like easy targets. They don't want to get hurt themselves. They don't like a lot of noise, a lot of commotion, or anything that could attract anything to them, especially the police or people looking at it. So if we take that in combination, and some of you have these things because you've blown my ears off with them, sometimes you got those horns and noise makers. So yeah, hey, sometimes they're really great. Sometimes if you are walking to your car, you have that burglar or that sounding alarm on your car. If someone gets to you before you get to your car, you can sound that off. It draws people's attention to that location. And if you start screaming, help, help, and then these are all the things that the bad guy don't want to see, and they know now time is very limited, and they're going to have to make a decision. Do I extend time where possibly somebody could come to that person's aid, or am I now setting myself up for an identification that can be identified later, or are they protracting the moment so much longer that now the police can come to the aid of that individual? So those are the things. Remember, we'll talk about criminology and the The bad guys, the criminalists, they love easy targets, cover of darkness, quick targets, somebody that don't look like they're going to fight back. They don't like the noise, and they don't like long actions. So now we reverted. We talked about our residents, so we'll talk about that in reference to the criminal. They don't like light outside. They don't want to be lit up. They want to hide under the darkness light. They don't like video cameras. They don't like the ring. These are all things that can assist you to keep them away from you. And we'll get into the very last part here, and it's probably one of the most important parts, and we talked about it, and we talked about it in piece, and we talked about it in whole, but I'm going to do a summation here. It's about the mental and physical inoculation to trauma. And what does that really mean? So in the academy, the Secret Service Academy, I have to train people on how to protect the president or vice president under any condition. It could be a physical attack. It could be a gun attack. And what I tell the class from day one as I speak to them is I will, without a doubt, hit you all several times in your face. And I'm not going to do it because I like it, because you have to be inoculated to the trauma. Because if you're not inoculated, and the first time you ever hit in your face, the first time you ever have any trauma to you, you're going to turn into like a deer in a headlight. There's going to be a moment where you have a little bit of a hesitation before you move to the next step, or maybe you've never thought of it before. And then that's what normally I tell the class. And I even tell them, I don't care if you're a Golden Glove or a martial artist, I'm going to hit you. And I'm going to hit you over and over again, and I'm going to teach you the correct way. And then eventually, mentally and physically, you're going to be able to respond to that moment when you need to. And that's what's very, very important, that when we talked about all these things today, it's about walking yourself mentally through this. Now, I was a Secret Service agent, and there was always competition every year, and it's toughest cop competition, or the FBI against the Secret Service. So some of you may have friends in the FBI. I have some friends in the FBI, so I always like to tease them. So some of you knew Miss Reno, the Attorney General in the FBI was training Miss Reno. And we had the privilege of the Secret Service to train them on how to protect people, because naturally the FBI didn't have a protection team at the time, and they were more about catching bad guys. So my team came to me and says, Mr. Copanzzi, these FBI guys are the dumbest people I've ever seen in my life. I could agree with them at times. And I said, yeah, I got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Something's wrong. Let me see. And I watched the videotapes of how we trained the FBI. And I noticed right away that every time Miss Reno was attacked, the FBI's retreated and or took a knee or went behind cover. And Miss Reno, if you knew Miss Reno, she was well over 6 foot, and she sat there or stood there by herself, an easy target. So no matter how many classes the FBI guys took, they were trained mentally to protect themselves as number one. They were never trained to protect somebody else other than themselves. So 5 days of training, we got nowhere. So I took all my best trainers and I assigned them to an agent that's around Miss Reno. And I said, you need to whisper in their ear and keep talking to them so they're conscious of what is around them at all times and what action are they going to take. And I said, I'm going to show you why. So I walked into the classroom with the FBI guys and I said, okay, guys, I want to know if somebody walks through that door, what are you going to do? And they have a gun. And they told me, they said, well, I'm going to drop a knee, I'm going to pull out my gun and return fire. And I said, well, that's great. So why don't you keep saying that when Miss Reno's under fire? They weren't trained. So I said, no, every time Miss Reno's under fire, you have to stand tall and step in front of her. And unfortunately, your job now is to catch the bullet and return fire. And it wasn't until that time that I was able to mentally walk them through the events that they could possibly see or not see, that they become efficient at what they did. So I'm telling you now that what we need to do as a group and as individuals is walk ourselves through the events of the day and the possible, we'll call threats or bad things that could possibly happen. And I know some of us have practiced because of the fact that we've had, unfortunately, a bad instance. It could be something as I'm on a walker, or I'm in my chair, and every time I get on gravel, I know I slip. So the first thing I do, I start to slow down. Or as I'm driving and I know it's rainy conditions and or snowing, the first thing I do is slow down. So those are things that we already have in our abilities, and we have already trained ourselves to respond to. What I'm asking you to do is respond to the what if. What if you have an intruder? What if somebody walks up to you unknown and next thing you know, they want your money? Are you going to be able to give them the money? Or what will you do? You freeze? Or will you try to fight? Well, I'm saying now, a gun in your face, the best thing you could possibly do, give them as much money as you want. Give them everything. Please let me know. Let me survive the moment. There was a time when someone would try to rob a young lady or accost a young lady, and they would survive the moment. Sometimes that isn't so. You have to make a calculated decision on your part. Do I continue to scream? Do I protract it? The thing I told all my daughters, do not get in the car with someone who's trying to abduct you. I don't care if you weigh 100 pounds, I don't care if you weigh 150 pounds. The subject's going to find it very difficult to hold on to you if you drop all your weight to the ground. And once you're on the ground, you keep screaming and you start kicking. Because again, that calculation of that subject, again, they want a short time. They want somebody who's an easy mark. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. That may be your moment to survive. And whatever it is, you have to decide at that moment what your best recourse is. Although I'm a martial artist, although I'm armed at sometimes, I don't like to be confronted, and I'd rather talk my way out of it or turn around than cause a particular incident. It's not worth it, not worth your life, and not the life of your family members. Unfortunately, this year we weren't able to do a lot of hands-on, but one thing has happened over the year. My wrist, my arms, and my neck have all healed from all of you that do all our techniques in our classes. I am definitely looking forward to next year again. I haven't seen a lot of you in a long time. I just can't wait to get in there again, and we talk about possible issues that you've overcome or saw, and we could talk our way through there. And at the end of the class, we get into the physicality of it that I know you all like. Between now and then, I hope you all a safe year. And if you ever need anything, I know that Jennifer, Heather, and Teresa is always available to you. You could ask any questions, or they would get back to me with any questions you have.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did too.
Hey,
Thank
goodbye.
you, Sarah.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.